So it's not very often I start my videos with me in the office, but there's a good reason for this one. Last Sunday I went to a local woodland, literally 10 minutes from where I live, and it was because fog was predicted again. And if you watch my last vlog, you'll know how much I get excited when there's some fog around in the woods. And predicted for a few hours in the morning, so I went to this local woodland, and it was one I went to last year, where there was some sort of gnarly trees, gnarly oaks. So I thought, well, I really fancy, a bit of gnarly oak fog goodness, and I'll give that a go. And I got there, and it was one of those foggy mornings where it was really dank and stark, and there was no light at all coming through, and it was very wet. So anyway, I set off, and I walked for a good hour or so, maybe more than that, hour and a half, through this area of woodland, and there was loads of wildlife around. I saw plenty of deer in the distance, and anyway, I got to a point where I hadn't even got my vlogging camera out, I hadn't even started to film anything, and was feeling a little bit dejected, and then all of a sudden I saw a couple of stag in the bracken. So that sparked me into getting my camera out and trying to get a shot. Now, what happened after then, I'll show you in the video here, and then it will become obvious when I join you again why I'm picking this one back up in the office. So watch how I got on while I was there, and I'll catch you in a second. That was unexpected. You join me back in the fog again. I'm not at home fen today. I'm only about 15 minutes away from my house. Just in a little wood, gnarly oak trees in this wood. And it was predicted fog for most of the morning again. We've been lucky lately, really still. So I just thought I'd have a trip out just to see what these gnarly old oaks look like. And if I'm honest, I've been walking around for probably, what time did I get here? Nearly 8, so it's now 9:30, hour and a half. I've been walking around for an hour and a half when we're wellies on. I'm quite knackered, to be honest, but and I think because the fog just wasn't quite thick enough, wasn't giving me the separation, and also the trees are, obviously they've just lost their autumn colours. Some are hanging on to them, but most have lost them. I don't know, there's a lot of them. It was very messy, and just nothing really stood out, if I'm honest. But then, all of a sudden, I saw what first of all looked like a gnarly oak twig sticking out from the bracken, and then I noticed it move, and there's 2 gorgeous stags. Oh, amazing. Just literally in the bracken, of course walking along with backpack. Stopped dead in my tracks. They stopped dead in their tracks. Stared at me. I stared at me. We had a staring contest for about 5 minutes. I thought, right, okay, backpack off. Slipped it on the floor. Tripod out. Nah, haven't got time for that. 100 to 400. Whacked it into continuous focus. Picked it up. Right in at 400mm. As far as I could go. And really messy. They're obviously good at this sort of thing, good at camouflage. They'd hidden themselves in a bit of bracken so they could just pop over the top, but not enough for me to get a real clear view of them. So I fired off a few shots there, just to see what they look like. I have pinched in, had a look back on the camera. They look reasonably sharp, to be fair. So of the face itself, all the way around is going to be quite messy. So whether I'll be able to make much out of them, I don't know. But just amazing to see these beautiful stags, huge, a pair of them. Pair of them? Yeah. Is that right? Yeah, just a pair of stags, just standing there, staring at me. Amazing. So I'll put any shots I did get of them up now, and you can have a quick look at them, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. So thanks to Mr. Stag, I did stop here and just backpack off, had a bit of a chill and had a look round and actually managed to spot a shot. This oak tree here, which is sort of arching over the top, it's got really green moss on the branches, is overhanging a fallen branch on the floor that's really twisty and gnarly. And then you've got the mist in the background, or the fog. I suppose it's more fog in the background. And yeah, it framed this sort of twisty, fallen, spooky branch on the floor. And I thought it just looked a little bit different. It looked very moody, very spooky, especially with the mist. So 100 to 400 on. Focused on the tree, the large tree that's overhanging. I've tried f5.6, f7.1. Obviously anything beyond the tree is going to be out of focus anyway, and I don't mind because it's foggy and it's misty and that will just be natural. I'm not 100% sure whether I want that fallen branch in focus or not. It is part of the scene because it's part of the construction of what I saw. So I've taken that in focus as well, so I might blend them, just depending on what it looks like. Quite a nice little scene. Quite a nice little scene. I've gone in a little bit closer on one as well, just to frame it a bit tighter. So I'm actually just going to stand here now. I'm just literally going to walk up and down this little area here and just see what I can see with a 100 to 400. So quiet. So quiet. Let's see what I can find. So yeah, there you go, and this is the image here on screen that I took at the end of that piece you've just watched. Now, the story goes that I got back here and I looked at the image on the screen, the raw file, and when I was there, as you'll have just seen, I could see the composition. I could see this, little twisty branch on the floor, and it was framed by the overhanging branch at the top, and I thought compositionally it worked really well. I could definitely see an image there, but when I got back and looked at it on the screen, it just didn't jump out at me at all, and I thought, no, I'm not as keen now as I was when I took it. But then I started to process it, and all of a sudden it came to life. And what I thought I'd do now is just share what I did to the image, and it's not going to be an in-depth Lightroom tutorial because my techniques are my techniques and everybody's got their own ways of doing things, but I'll just walk you through the steps that I took from the raw file to the end image, just so you can see how I approached it and how it changed from something that I wasn't that keen on to something at the end that actually became quite popular. When I put it on social media, it just seemed to take off, and particularly on Twitter. I was absolutely amazed on Twitter. It seemed to just go viral, and even today I'm still getting likes on it, and which is great. Don't get me wrong, I love it, but it's one of those real sort of head-scratching moments where an image goes viral and you think, why? What makes it so likable to the global audience that's been looking at the image? It's been seen now by over 68,000 people, which is incredible, absolutely incredible. And as I say, I've got plenty of other images that personally I like even more, but that one seemed to take off. So yeah, this is how I edit it from start to finish, and you'll see if there's any tips in there you want to pick up, great. But yeah, just thought I'd share this with you. So let's get into Lightroom and I'll talk you through what I did. So this is the image when I brought it into Lightroom, and as you can see, it's pretty flat, but it's a raw file, so that's expected. I did try different compositions of this tree. I shot it a bit closer or a bit tighter, sort of make more of a rounded scene. This was the one I focused on the branch at the top, and I think, yeah, one of these were the ones I focused on the small tree at the bottom. But I just felt that was a bit too tight, so I went back to this particular image, and this was the one that I was going to start to process. Now, where I started with this, and it's often where I start now, is I purchased earlier this year a load of presets from Mark Littlejohn, and I've got them here in my presets on Lightroom. And what I tend to do is I just have a flick through them just to give me an idea what an image might look like with one of Mark's presets on, just to give me a starting point. And I think it was dark woods that I looked at, and I thought, actually, I really like that kind of magenta tone and those reddish tones that are coming through the background of the fog there. So that was what I had in my mind when I started to edit it. It was a bit too green, this particular preset, the way it's applied here, so I knew I was going to need to adjust that, but it was just to give me that idea of that magenta tone into the highlights, really, at the back. So let me talk you through where I started and my thought process. So I started with crops. I was playing with the crops just to see whether, taking the tree out a bit would work. Played around with that a few times, as you can see. Started off with this crop here, which removed the majority of the tree on the left. Now, spoiler alert, it didn't finish like this because I brought some of it back. But again, this is the way I edit. It's a bit trial and error. I will start things and see what it looks like, and then probably end up going back again to where I started, as I guess most of us do. Then I just cooled it down from a temperature perspective, so just moved the temperature down just to give it that cool feeling, because it was a very cool, foggy morning, and there was no real warmth coming through. There was no light, so there's no warmth in the light. And then I started to play with the tints. Again, trial and error. Ended up putting it back again, didn't like it. Oh look, we cropped it again. This was another crop just to bring back that tree on the left hand side, because I felt that did just give the left hand side of the image a little bit more anchorage, and made that tree a bit more visible. Then just messed around, bit of white clipping, exposure again. I wanted to bring the exposure up really just to enhance the fog at the back if I could. Played around with a bit of vibrance. Again, this is just playing, really. The vibrance, my idea was, obviously we've got this lovely moss on this branch at the top, and I just really wanted to see whether that would help to just lift out the colours in that moss at the top. And then I started to do some, what was the old split toning, which is now still split toning, but it's now called colour grading. And I started to play with this, and in the shadows, I put the cool tones. So I put a bit of blue in the shadows to give me that cool feeling that I wanted. And then in the highlights, I introduced that magenta that I saw in Mark's preset. And I think as soon as I introduced that magenta, it started to come to life. I mean, I thought, this is something I think I like and I can continue to edit. And I think you get to that point in an edit sometimes where you've played around with lots of things, and then you realise whether it's either going to work or whether you just dump it and go on to the next one. And then in the mid-tones, I put a little bit of warmth into the mid-tones. This wasn't how it ended up, surprise, surprise again. But again, I just wanted to introduce coolness into the shadows, the magenta highlights, and just an overall bit of warmth in some of the mid-tones. So, and then I blended it using the blending tool here. And then a bit of balance. Again, I'm playing, guys, here. This isn't me showing you an expert tutorial in how to do split toning. I'll leave that to the experts. This is just me playing. A little bit of sharpening, which I tend to do a little bit in Lightroom, but then I'll finish this one off in Photoshop anyway. So chromatic, I never say that word, chromatic aberrations in lens profile. Should have done that at the beginning. Here we go, a bit of playing again. So I'm now cooling it down again now, just changing the temperature a little bit to make it that a little bit cooler. Then I started to play with the vignettes. Now, I do like a vignette on an image. I really think it does draw the eye into the center of an image, and particularly with this frame here, the way that the vignette works, I think just there's nothing really on the outside of the frame here that is of interest. It is the piece in the middle, and therefore I thought I could get away with a nice vignette to draw that eye through. So that worked. Then moved on to a bit of luminance. Again, this was me trying to look at the greens, as I said earlier on this branch, looking at the luminance of that green, and then looking at the saturation of that green. and then also the reds, and that was because we've got some reds here, red tones in these leaves at the top, and obviously we've got some reds coming through in the background as well, so giving them a little bit of punch. White clipping again, because I'm obviously moving things around, so I'm just balancing the histogram here as best I can. I tend to look at the histogram when I'm editing, and just to see where it's going, and if I'm clipping or if I'm moving anything to one side or the left where I think it's going slightly out, then I'll try and keep it as balanced as I can. Oh look, a little bit more exposure. Clearly I didn't like it too dark. Touch of clarity, again I thought this could take clarity. We've got a lot of branch and twig detail here, and obviously the tree itself and the overhanging branch is in focus, and I wanted that to have the clarity, but again not too much, because the back of the image doesn't need it or doesn't want it at all. So once I did that, I added a touch of dehaze, just to take a little bit of that sort of mistiness out of the front of the frame, and make that branch at the top a little bit clearer. And then I took it out again. And then I added a little bit back in again. There we go. Then I started to play with the tone curve. This was again just playing to see what that did, and I don't think by the looks of it, it did a great deal. Yeah, in the shadows and the highlights. I ended up doing that back in Photoshop at the very end as well, actually. And as you can see here, I'm just playing with the contrast primarily, just looking at where I want the light to be and where I want the dark to be. So this was moving from, you know, an overall sort of flattish feel, and then when I introduced the highlights, it was picking up a bit of a light in the background. Again, playing with these until I got to something that was relatively okay to what I was looking for. Oh look, I've gone back to colours again. I've gone all over the place with this edit, I really have, but I'm showing you this warts and alls guy. So yes, a bit of yellows and greens. Again, this was more for this branch here. So we've got some leaves here on the branches hanging down below this one that I thought could just need a little bit of additional saturation just to give them a bit of punch. And again, then I balanced that with the colour grading. And then I finished off with the vignettes again. This is normally the final touch for me. And that was what I ended up with in Lightroom. What I then did, I took it into Photoshop. I normally do my final edits in Photoshop, and this is the final edit in Photoshop. I applied a high pass sharpening filter. Again, I wanted to get that branch at the top as sharp as I could be, because that's the frame, that's really what draws the eye, because you've got that green moss on there. And then again, as I said earlier, what I did, I applied another tone curve or curves adjustment layer to this just to brighten up that background a bit. So you've got the vignette working around the outside, you've got the light hitting the top of those of this branch here, and then you've got that lovely misty light coming in the background. So yeah, that was the final image. And once I'd got to that stage and I'd gone through Photoshop, I thought, yeah, I think it works now. I'm happy enough to start sharing it on social media, and that's where the story began. So there you go. That's my very rambling Lightroom and Photoshop technique. By all means, if you get anything out of that, then great, but please don't follow my trial and error because I sometimes get a bit lost. But yeah, that was the result. It ended up good, and that's the main thing. So there we go. So there you have it. Hope that was useful for you. Hope you found something in that made a bit of sense to you. When I'm editing, sometimes I just go off on all sorts of tangents and come back to a point where I settle on, and then I'll just leave it for a bit and come back to it, and if I'm still happy with it, then I'll put it out. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that, and until the next time I can get out and take a proper vlog in the field, then yeah, I shall see you then. So take care of yourself, stay safe, and see you soon.